Zombie apocalypse.
Hi, and welcome to Keyboard Kraken. Today, we're going to very quickly go through some PS5 settings that you should change to get the most out of your system. So let's dive straight in. First, we're going to look at the accessibility options. There's a number of things you can tweak here depending on your needs. For example, you can invert colours, increase text size, make text bold, and so on. You may even just prefer the larger text size, so it's worth taking a quick look just to see what works best for you. Next, go into the system software and update settings to configure how you want updates to be handled. You can choose to have them downloaded or installed automatically, depending on your needs. If you'd like to use remote play, then you'll need to come into these settings here and enable that. Remote play is when you play on your PS5 through your phone or PC. Now for some power saving tips. Here you can pick how long you want the PS5 to wait before putting itself into rest mode. You can even set separate limits depending on what you're doing. So if you're watching a movie, for example, you can set that to be a longer limit just so that it doesn't interrupt your viewing experience. Next, we'll look at how you want your PS5 to behave in rest mode. If you want to be able to charge accessories, for example, you'll want to make sure the power is still going to the USB ports. However, you can set a cutoff point for this too. You can also choose whether or not to leave it connected to the internet and whether you can turn the console on remotely or not. One really good setting to tweak here is the time to wait until your controllers turn off. I recommend setting this as low as possible, as this will save battery whenever you step away from the PS5. Now let's look at the storage options. When you go into console storage, you'll be able to see your remaining hard drive space. The PS5 does not come with much space by default, so if you'll be playing PS4 games, I highly recommend that you get a USB hard drive to save your PS4 games onto, so that they do not take up space on your PS5. Once you have one, you can choose to always have PS4 games installed to that drive. It's also worth noting that you can put your PS5 games onto this drive if you're done with them for now, but want the option to come back to them at a later point. Do note that they will not play from there, as they will need the ultra-fast PS5 hard drive to function. However, copying a PS5 game back to your console from this drive will still be much faster than having to download it before you can play it again. Next up, sound. You might not be aware, but your PS5 controller has a microphone which is switched on by default when you turn on your PS5. If you do not want this, come into this setting here and switch it to be muted by default instead. Just remember to unmute it before trying to party chat with anyone. In the volume settings, you can choose how loud you want the speaker on the microphone to be. I usually leave this at the default, but if you're hard of hearing you may want to turn it up, and if you do not want to use it at all, then you want to turn that right down. In the display settings, most things will be configured correctly depending on your TV, but there's a couple of things that you should definitely tweak yourself just to be safe. First is adjusting the display area to properly match your TV. Next, set when the screen should dim after being left inactive. If you have an OLED TV, set this to 5 minutes to prevent screen burning. It's just not worth the risk. For the controllers, there's a few more settings that you may want to change to get the best experience. You can configure the vibration intensity as well as the trigger effect intensity. Turning these down will save battery, but you won't be getting the intended effect from them, so bear that in mind. You can, however, easily set the brightness of the controller light to dim in order to save battery, and honestly, this is not a huge difference, and I doubt you're really going to spend much time looking at that light when you're playing games. If you're the kind of person who always has to go into the game's menus to invert the controls, change the difficulty or configure subtitles, there are some settings here you can change that will apply to your PS5 games by default, so you do not have to do this each time. Additionally, you can also choose whether you want games to run in performance mode or resolution mode by default. Typically, performance mode means a higher frame rate at a loss to some graphical fidelity, whereas resolution mode instead focuses on the best resolution possible, usually at the detriment of the frame rate. I leave mine to default, to be honest, as each game varies and sometimes they offer additional choices beyond just those two. Channels like Digital Foundry will often have a detailed breakdown of the performance of each game to help you make a more informed decision if you need help deciding. As we get close to the end, we have notification settings. There's a wealth of options here, so you should 100% configure this to your liking. In each category, you can pick and choose exactly how these behave. Personally, I dislike getting notifications if I'm watching media, so I choose not to get party invites or update notifications at this time. Finally, we have captures and broadcast settings. For screenshots, there are two file formats you can choose between. If you're not familiar with them, JPEG will take up less space, but PNG will produce a better picture. If you're someone who uses photo mode in games a lot, or you're just going to be taking a lot of screenshots, then consider which one you would prefer. For the video clip format, WebM will be the most efficient and MP4 is the most compatible. Just something to consider if you want to use your footage elsewhere. The last settings here you want to look at are the trophy settings. By default, it takes a photo and a short video each time you get a trophy. You should consider adjusting this to only happen when you get a higher rarity of trophy to save storage space, or turn it off altogether if you wish. You can also tweak the length of the clip it saves to be either 15 seconds or 30 seconds. Note that if you've already been using your PS5 and you change these settings, the change won't be retroactive. So if you were not aware that your PS5 was doing this, you want to delete those, you'll need to manually go back in and reclaim that space. So before you go, please hit that like button, hit subscribe, and let me know below which tip helped you the most. If you have any of your own suggestions about settings to tweak, please feel free to share them below too. Until next time, take care.